Welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is America's Progressive Era. We're going to talk about 5 terms that, as you go to read more about this topic and time period, you should key in on, and they should help to give you a better sense of what's going on. Let's dig in. First off, before we get into these terms, we should understand what progressive means and the time period that we're talking about. When we say progressive era, historians have disagreed a lot over really what that is, partly because those who lived through the era struggled with their own definitions of it. Broadly, if we kind of look at all these different forms of scholarship, it's a time period where, and it's individuals who sought to be able to reshape American society in the ways that they see fit, either through voluntary action, through use of government, or through coercive action with use of government. Now, this can be things that would have, let's say, positive effects, things for the social good, but they can also, within their own time and through time, but they can also be what we today would define as being very negative, right? So someone who's let's say, racist, at the end of the 19th century wants to use new scientific tools to be more racist, and they think it's good because they like racism. So progressivism kind of means folks see that there are ills in society and they want to fix it. And the question is, how do they do that, and what do they want to achieve, and that whole purpose. So again, progressivism isn't wholly a positive, perfect, wonderful thing in any way, shape, or form. But it's this question of use of government, use of voluntarism, right? This kind of thing to kind of, again, reshape American society and culture. All right. Number 1, 16th Amendment. Now, the 16th Amendment is finally ratified in 1913, and it relates specifically to the question of, or the process of the federal government being able to lobby an income tax on American citizens, right? So before this, although an income tax had existed, especially during the American Civil War, this hadn't been entrenched in this way. Beginning in the 1860s and 70s, through activists and others like Henry George, you start to see a strong support for the idea of eventually an income tax, with the understanding that this might help to widen gaps between the rich and poor that existed at this time. This will lead us into a number of things, right? So there are some scholars who say this is what allows prohibition to occur because of liquor taxes, all that. But either way, 16th Amendment. 17th Amendment, ratified as well in 1913. The 17th Amendment changes the Constitution. When the Constitution was originally ratified, U.S. senators were not directly elected. They were elected by state legislatures voting. This amendment, the 17th Amendment, changes that to direct election of senators. There was some question as to whether or not state legislatures by the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries were relatively corrupt organizations or institutions. Political machines were a part of the process at the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Tammany Hall, others, patronage was in. And so there was this sense that maybe we should trust the public, trust the people, right, to be able to do this. So again, 1913, 17th Amendment, direct election. Number 3, The Jungle. The Jungle is a fairly famous book. It was written by a man named Upton Sinclair, and it's published in the early 1900s. Sinclair went to the stockyards on the south side of Chicago and worked in that community for a while. And from there, he develops this kind of fictional narrative of an immigrant family trying to make it. And he kind of bases it in the experiences that he endured there. And he depicts the realities for these workers and their families of an utterly brutal and inhuman and really soul-crushing process of just, it's indescribable. The blood everywhere, the mistreatment of women, the mistreatment of workers, regardless of gender. it's very, very difficult in some ways to read. It's disheartening in all ways. And the jungle has a lot of implications. So by the early 20th century, Theodore Roosevelt's elected president. He takes over after William McKinley was assassinated, but then he's elected. And Roosevelt had a certain kind of progressivism that he called his square deal. And what'll come of it, and the Congress will support this, is legislation to protect American consumers as they see it. One of these things is built off the jungle, and it's called the Food and Drug Administration. So this is part of this, and something called the Meat Inspection Act. This was another part of it as well. So those are our fourth terms. Now, again, they're going to try to be able to have some oversight here. Now, it's not perfect and it doesn't work wholly well, but we still have the FDA and the Meat Inspection Act today. Fifth, the NAACP, right? The National Association for the Advancement of Colored Persons, right? This is the name of it. It's founded in the early 1900s during the Progressive Era, largely out of the fact that you have this supposedly, newly convicted group of individuals who are in government who want to be able to try to help society improve and do better, but it's pretty clearly based on race. It is pretty clearly a sense of improvement for whites and whites only. And what you start to see is efforts on the part of African Americans and their allies to be able to rectify that. And so the NAACP is founded, and they're going to begin trying to combat the horrific existence of the Jim Crow system, not only trying to end the laws, but in other ways as well, in a transformational process that's going to take decades. All right, thanks so much.